from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today's topic focuses on the development and trends in higher education. Over the years, from time to time, we have dealt with this subject since that's what our institution is all about, and education at all levels affects not only the citizenry of the United States, but it certainly is something that drives the process of our entire globe. We're very pleased to welcome to our program the president of our institution, Dr. C. Robert Bennett, who has been president of North Idaho College over 8 years, and he comes to us with a distinguished background in administration. He was also the president of Gogebic College in Michigan. He holds a baccalaureate degree from Western Illinois University, and his doctorate is from Iowa State. Dr. Bennett is also very active in the American Association of Community Colleges, and at the time of taping this program, he's just returned from the National Conference in Minnesota, where, among other things, the President of the United States spoke to all the delegates. Dr. Bennett, we've had you on the program a number of times, and it's a great pleasure to have you back, and we look forward to talking about something dear to your heart, and that is higher education.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always a little anxious when I see three people like you sitting here, and I know I'm going to have questions fired at me about education, but I welcome the opportunity.
Well, it will go well, and as always, I'm very pleased to have our regular two panel members with us, Janelle Berg, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Steve Shink, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and we shall ask Janelle to commence today's questioning.
Dr. Bennett, Tony indicated that we were going to talk about higher education today, but one of the first steps to getting to higher education is completing your high school career or some kind of similar GED requirement. How many people are going to matriculate at colleges and universities? Is that going to keep up the steady flow into colleges and universities over the 21st century?
Well, I was just at this conference, and we were talking about the trends of new populations coming into higher education. If we look at different kinds of populations, I think we'll see different stories. For example, if we look at the traditional white student who's come in from a middle-class family and the kind of person that normally has matriculated to college, I think you'll see fewer of those people simply because there are fewer of them. I think what you're going to find, and will be the biggest challenge to colleges, will be an increased number of minorities coming up through that process. I think we'll continue to cherish the high school education and encourage people to go, but I do think you're going to have a very different kind of student coming out of those high schools, and for that reason, I think colleges will probably have to change to accommodate those students.
Do you think there are going to continue to be that number of students also who have completed their high school education perhaps many years before, or have completed a couple of years of college sometime in the past, and are now coming back to continue their education and maybe get an advanced degree?
Everything I know about job trends would tell me that, yes, that will continue and increase. I think the community colleges have been the front runners in terms of accommodating those people, and for two reasons. First, I think we're very flexible, and also we're very close to those people who need those changes. And I think that will continue. I'm not so sure that so many of those people will want to continue in the field of pursuing a degree, because many of those people, as you know, probably have degrees, but they will want to come back and seek some kind of new knowledge that will help them get a better job. And some are just coming back because they simply like to study. But I would say it'll be a little different kind of trend in the future with respect to degrees for the older people than it's been in the past.
Steve Shink.
Dr. Bennett, our topic today may be higher education in general, but I am well aware that your particular expertise is in community colleges, and I thought maybe I ought to give you an opportunity to give our audience a little better grounding in what community colleges are and how they relate to the rest of higher education in this country.
I had just finished reading an article a few days ago about the two most important things that are going to impact higher education and possibly the future of this country. And this person might have had a bias. One of the things he mentioned naturally was the computer, and the other was the community college. Most people still do not have an understanding of the tremendous movement in higher education that's occurred in the last 50 years. We've always had junior colleges for the last century and a half, but the concept of community college really grew after the Johnson administration, or as a result of the Johnson administration, when so many dollars from the federal government were put into VOTEC programs, and as a result, it just blossomed. So now more than half of all the students who attend college go to community colleges. And as I was saying to a group just a few hours ago, probably the largest institutions, higher education institutions in the country, are now community colleges. So many people go to smaller community colleges and think that the university is the bigger of the two, but in fact that's not true. If you would go to a system like Maricopa Community College or Miami-Dade or some of the Minneapolis programs or Los Angeles, you'll find that they're huge complexes and extremely complex. Ours is complex, it's just not to the degree in terms of numbers that the other schools are. In terms of looking at the future, I would say that movement is not going to change. I just attended a conference where the President spoke, and Secretary of Education Riley was there, and Reich, Secretary of Labor. And all of these people were looking to the community college to be the kind of fulcrum to get us started again in terms of maintaining a way of life that we cherish in this country. And I happen to believe that they're right.
Let me pose a quick follow-up question, and I know you may not be able to speak as authoritatively about Canadian community colleges as about American community colleges, but we do have a sister college, East Kootenai Community College in Cranbrook, along with two Japanese sister colleges and perhaps a fourth community college or sister college in Korea. But to the best of your knowledge, is the role of community colleges in Canada similar to the role of community colleges in the United States?
I think it's similar in that they want to give the local person an opportunity to enhance their educational background. But I think the focus is a little different. And by the way, they're very strong, and they're getting stronger all of the time. Two things I think are different. One is that I think they have a heavier concentration on vocational schools than maybe we do. They might spend more time and are more intense about the training of those skills. And then there's a sincere interest in terms of reaching to the other countries. They have even a more aggressive attitude about establishing sister college relationships and bringing people from other countries to Canada. They see, I think, themselves as one of the real indicators of economic strength, and there's a great deal of money being put into the Canadian community college systems.
Dr. Bennett, you had an institution that is both very, very alive and active in the academic world and also in technology or vocational, that we used to call it. What do you see as the future of how we balance this, particularly at the community college level? Certainly the academic program and liberal arts and people understanding all the Renaissance approach to life, and yet we've become a much more technical world in technology, and it requires more technical training, such as the Vice President of the United States talks about the information highway. What do you see that we are going to need to do to continue to do what we've done in the past, but at the same time address this time-consuming technology as a training?
Well, we struggle with this as an institution, and all institutions are struggling because they're rethinking their curriculum. I think one thing we can never abandon is the idea that we can give people an opportunity to look inside themselves and understand themselves as a whole person and how they relate to the rest of the world. And I think we do that through the humanities, we do it through the traditional arts and sciences. However, we recognize that more and more we have to have specific kinds of skills if we're going to do well in the job market. So we have this strange combination of, on one hand, we want to be the Renaissance man, and on the other hand, we want to be a skilled technician. So we find people coming back to the community colleges who are very, very well educated in the broadest sense of the word, but have to have a specific skill. On the other hand, I think that the technical end of education is going to have to change dramatically, where we have traditionally blocked people into 3- and 6-hour blocks for study. We know that people can't stay, particularly the adult population, in those traditional blocks, and we've got to be much more flexible in terms of how we answer, or how we offer those programs to those people. So there are a lot of new pressures on the existing system. We think we're flexible, we think we're modern, but we're finding out that as modern and flexible as we think we are, we're not changing fast enough.
I hear in your answer something that triggers my thinking, and that is, I'm thinking of the 18-year-old who comes in from high school and is just starting in that process, and with this balancing act and these added requirements, are we looking in the future? Maybe it's not a 4-year program for a baccalaureate degree?
Well, you know, the interesting thing, I just got back from Minnesota. I was reading a newspaper article about the Minnesota system, and now they're going to be funding their colleges on the basis of how many people graduate, which is sounds like the right thing to do, but we know that in community colleges, many people really don't have any intention of graduating when they come here. They have a lot of other reasons. So I don't know the answer to that question, I guess.
It certainly would mean that there's probably going to be fewer electives in the program, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. I think particularly at the community college. The thing that worries me in terms of your first question is that these people are piling up great debts in going to school. And I think education is going to become increasingly expensive. So if we say to people, well, you're going to have to go 5 years rather than 4, we're going to have to be very focused about what those people take. And I'm not sure they can all afford it. I mean, it's very tough for a lot of our young people who want to get on with a school, and with financial aid being cut back the way it is, I'm not so sure we can say it's going to take 5 years. We simply may have to create a different kind of an institution so that those people can move through in 4. I will say this. I think all institutions have got to improve their advising system so that students do not just stray from one program to the other as much as they have in the past and have traditionally liked to do so. But it's just become too expensive to do it.
Janelle Berg.
I want to continue follow up on that line of questioning with regard to expensiveness of education and the whole cost of higher education in general. Do you foresee that it's going to be a continuing trend? And was there any discussion about the private school as opposed to the public university and how that's going to fit in? And of course, community colleges are part of for the most part, public school systems.
I wish I knew more about the private school in terms of how they're going to address the question of increasing cost. I think they're struggling. I think the very prestigious ones are doing well, but I think the private school that appealed to the person who was local or within an area is struggling. I do think they're going to become more expensive. I think the mood of the country is such that they want to encourage people to get an education, but they are suspicious of having to support education to the extent that they have in the past, and new methods are going to have to be found for finding the money to support an increasingly expensive kind of learning process. So I would guess that the student will probably have to share a greater and greater burden. And that may reverse some trends with respect to how many people go to college. And the irony for me is that there's never been an age in the history of mankind when they need to go more. So we're in a dilemma. And I think our national leaders are wrestling with that big time. And I don't think they have the answers yet.
Well, in a state like Idaho, and I think our neighboring states are not unusual in this, Idaho's not unusual in this respect. Our neighboring states have the same kinds of problems. But with respect to a state like Idaho, we have several colleges, and they're spread out over the state. But there's a finite number of dollars that have to be spread around among all of those colleges. How do you perceive that that's going to work out in the 21st century? Do you think we're going to see more combination of programs at one college so that, okay, I want to be, say, for example, a nurse, and the nursing programs are going to be offered only at X and Y school as opposed to all of the schools? Or something similar? I'm using that only as an example.
Nursing, as you mentioned, is probably one of the best examples to illustrate that institutions are going to have to cooperate together if they're going to serve the people well. And I think no longer can we say that each person is going to do his or her separate thing without attention to see how we can cooperate better and use finances more efficiently. However, I do think that because certain kinds of programs are so expensive, we will have to specialize, particularly at the senior institution level. I'm hoping that the kind of relationships that are existing right now between the university and the community colleges will continue to be enhanced, because I think we can maintain our own private mission and our own private way of doing things and still cooperate and be part of a bigger picture. And I'm very proud of the fact that we've got the University of Idaho and Lewis Clark on our campus, and that students can stay here and complete a 4-year degree. But there's another piece to what you're saying, and that is that technology is now making it possible from institutions from without the state, maybe clear to the other end of the country, or maybe in another country, to invade our space. So I think the competition for specific courses will continue to increase, and that can be good for the customer or the student, but it can be very disconcerting for the people who are in the business of teaching.
Would you say generally, however, that certain courses will always be offered, probably basic courses, at most institutions, that we're not going to see a specialization with regard to general courses. So
No,
that
I don't. I think
people would
you're
have to
right.
go somewhere else to take, say, their freshman and sophomore year, and then they could go on for their junior and senior year at another location. Probably that's not going to happen.
Well, the only thing I would say is that we've had core courses, and everybody believes that they're still important in terms of understanding what humanity's about. But I think the way we teach those core courses may change dramatically. And it's an interesting thing. Peter Drucker, I was reading a book, and he said it's not so much what we've learned about teaching that will change. It's what we've learned about learning that will force us to change. And as we learn more about how people learn, we will individualize it more, and technology may force us to rethink even what we teach as well as how we teach it.
Steve Sheen. Dr. Bennett, up until now, we've been talking about what have been the traditional programs at comprehensive community colleges, and that is academic transfer programs, or what we used to call vocational programs, now have a tendency to call technical programs. But there is emerging at North Idaho College, and I believe this is a trend across the country, another major program area that is actually growing faster than the others. Is that not correct?
That's very true. In fact, having again been at this convention, I was in a meeting and they were discussing the very question you've raised. And the presidents were being asked, in terms of what is the fastest growing thing in education, period, what seems to be the case in your college? And without hesitation, all of them almost spoke together and said it's this idea of continuing education, job retraining, and the idea that people will pay for specialized training in a very different way than they've traditionally paid for the courses. In other words, they'll pick up the full bill. And so many colleges are beginning to experience, when they put an emphasis there, not only are they getting the funding for those programs, but they are getting additional funding to offset the cost for the more traditional kinds of programs. So it's for the first time that public institutions are envisioning a profit. And I think for that reason, there's going to be increased attention given to that new way. And some people are saying we're sacrificing too much, we're prostituting education in a sense. But I don't think it will change. I think technology and the demands of the consumer have changed and are changing so rapidly that we simply must respond.
Are there lessons, and we should all learn from each other, I'm sure there are lessons that the traditional programs have to teach to the emerging workforce training programs, but are there lessons from this new model that we might consider applying to the way we offer academic transfer and technical programs as well?
I think we're in such a beginning stage of this. I don't know that one dog can teach the other dog new tricks, but I think the one group is more eager to learn the new tricks because there is, in terms of the American way of doing things, there's a profit connected to it. And I think that is a huge motivator in terms of people wanting to become more innovative. I think, however, as the other side is threatened, they will tend to change. And it's an interesting thing that would be the force that will cause it, but in fact, I think it might be.
We introduced the program, Dr. Bennett indicating that you had just returned from the American Association of Community Colleges in Minnesota, and I should tell our viewers we're taping this in April and it will air later, but there were a lot of delegates there, and as those conferences always do, there's a discussion of where we're headed in management and funding, and I know President Clinton had some ideas about the future of education. What was on the delegates' minds the most about how to cope with this change? And usually in those conferences, something emerges as a major theme.
The first thing that always comes to me as a result of going to those national conventions is an increased sense of pride and vigor. When you go away to something like that and you see all the energy that's created with that many people being excited about the concept and believing in community colleges, you walk away saying, hey, we are part of something that's good and right. But I think the very word you said, change, is the thing that causes most people anxiety. We all recognize that it's here, but we're having a hard time not coping with the concept of change, but the rapidity of change. And we're all trying to find some kind of an easy answer to help us work through this demand for so many, many services. And technology always comes back to be our panacea for that. And yet deep down we know that there are human needs that have to be met in other ways. So educators wrestle with both that thing of how do we increase the knowledge base, but But then how do we deal with this problem of man's humanity to man? And I see that surfacing. It's beneath the level, right beneath the level of talk, but it's there. And it was there, I think, in terms of the implications of what President Clinton was saying to us was there. He just talked to us about the Oklahoma City thing. And he was saying, as educators, you have a huge responsibility in terms of increasing the knowledge base. But we also have to learn how to live together as a community in a harmonious way. And we have a responsibility to think that through very vigorously.
In any country, particularly a great country like the United States with its great influence around the world and our great complexities, and as a large, actually we are really the leader in the world in relation to democratic processes. And without the proper educational base, that would not be, or that would collapse. And so I'm going to follow up on what you just said. We've had a lot of shrill voices in society attacking all institutions, including education. Not that there's not legitimate criticism of institutions, but if we become totally cynical and we do not use the tools of education to deal with facts and evidence and make decisions based on emotion, what will that do to both education and the future of this country?
Well, I think we're moving in a direction that a lot of us are fearful of. That came out in the conference as well. More and more people who were administrators were saying, if we do not use good hard data to help us make decisions, we are probably going to move in directions that we don't want to move in terms of relying too much on our emotions. But we were talking earlier about the idea that as we increase technology's ability to reach to us as individuals, which on one hand is very good, we could reach a point where we isolate ourselves from the group to the extent that we don't know how to deal effectively with people who have different points of view. And I think that there is something inherent about the human animal that says, not only do I want to have some time for myself, but I want to be part of something else. And technology has a way, in a strange way, with extremist groups, for people who are very lonely, to reach to them in a strange and subtle way. And I'm fearful of that. I think education tries to help us learn how to live with the brotherhood of man. And if we get too far off on one track and get too isolated, I think we could become easily moved in a direction that would be dangerous for us as a community of people.
Janelle Berg.
I want to follow up on a question that Steve asked you a little earlier, and I think you alluded to in your answer. But in addition to the traditional programs that are available at community colleges, there are also special interest programs. Also, many community colleges have programs on campus such as our Popcorn Forum here at North Idaho College, concerts, other kinds of things. What do you see as being the community colleges giving back to their communities in the future? Was that a discussion, and how do you think that's going to go in the 21st century?
Some time ago, there was a discussion about communities and churches, and somebody had said once upon a time, what would a community be without a church? You know, we may not go to it, but what would we want to be, would we not want to have it? And I feel the same way about community colleges. There is a social character about us as a group that I think changes as a result of having the opportunity to come together and hear different points of view, and hear a symphony orchestra, and watch an athletic contest. You can't do those things by yourselves. And so I maintain there's always going to be a need for a strong campus that will bring a realization to all of us as individuals that we do need each other. And I think the community college is unique because it does get right into the fiber of each of our beings and say, we want to be a part of your life. And frankly, I think all of us need that.
And along with that, I know you've offered programs or classes in a number of special interest things. Painting, could be needlework, things that are not at all traditional. But you've had a very successful program, I think, offering these things, perhaps health, fitness kinds of classes. Do you foresee that will continue to be a growing part of the community college service to the community?
I think it will, and I think we'll try hard to make those classes available. But I do believe that private entrepreneurs are also seeing this as a market, and we're now facing a kind of competition that we haven't experienced in the past. That'll probably make our programs better. But I think there's that need, and people have finally recognized that people as adults don't quit learning simply because they have a diploma, and they want to investigate all kinds of things about life. So we as a community college have a responsibility through special interest classes to give back. And I think we've done that in an admirable fashion.
Steve Sheen.
Dr. Bennett, I think there's a growing trend in all of the public sector areas for a demand for increased accountability, and education's not free from that and shouldn't be.
No.
What did the conference tell you about some of the trends in other parts of the nation in terms of funding linked with what we call outcomes assessment?
Well, I heard a great deal about outcomes assessment. I think people are going to have to prove in some way or another, we're struggling with how that has to be done. But we have to show that there's value added for the investment. And so I think institutions are clamoring for new ways to get that done. But I also think that in the last 30, 40 years, we have had this great outpouring of money to education saying, we believe in you. And that's been good. But now people are beginning to say, but I have other demands too, so that money, I think, is going to be somewhat restricted. And we come right back to the age of how do we continue to provide those many, many services, but probably for less dollars.
I have a question that's rather impossible for 2 minutes or so left. But Dr. Bennett, you're always so wonderful to talk with me, and you've got to share this with the viewers in Canada and around the Northwest. What is an educated person?
Boy, that's a tough one for me, Tony, but I guess an educated person is one who simply realizes that he or she does not have all the answers, but is constantly fascinated with all that there is to learn out there and can continue to be learned throughout his or her lifetime. And I guess I would say that would be a mark of an educated person.
In relation to that question, obviously K through 12 and the college and universities play a vital role in that. What would you recommend to a student coming into college that could equip them best, other than they're majoring in a field and following their discipline, but that could take them through the life to enhance not only their learning but their success?
Well, I've said this on a couple of speeches I've given. I think they simply have to take themselves more seriously. I think too often people say, well, somebody else will take care of me, and that just isn't going to exist much longer. People have got to understand that the only person that can really take care of himself or herself is that individual. And through education, they simply can do it better. And the more focused that an individual can become in terms of how important he or she is, and I don't think that's selfish. I think it's just easier then to get from education what it has to offer.
And also cope with life. Education provides tools of how to find what you need, even after you've left the institution. I've received the signal from our staff. Dr. Bennett, we're out of time. On behalf of the panel and our staff, we thank you for being with us. It's been really informative and I know helpful to our viewers about the future of education.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Dr. C. Robert Bennett, the president of North Idaho College, speaking to the issue of higher education. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, and we will discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.